Imagine owing 3 times your annual salary. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that's exactly where the entire world is right now. The global debt has reached a staggering $324 trillion. That's not a typo. To put that in perspective, if you spent $1 million every single day, it would take you over 887,000 years to spend that much money. And we're not just talking about government debt here. This is the total amount that governments, businesses, and individuals owe across the entire planet. Today we're diving deep into the most shocking financial crisis that nobody's talking about. How did we get here? Who owes all this money? And more importantly, what happens when countries can't pay it back? Stick around, because the answers might terrify you. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is global debt? Simply put, it's the total amount of money owed by everyone on the planet. Governments, corporations, and regular people like you and me. When we talk about $324 trillion, we're combining 3 major categories. First, there's government debt, also called public debt. This is money that countries borrow to pay for things like infrastructure, military, healthcare, and yes, sometimes just to pay the interest on previous debt. As of 2025, global government debt alone sits at around $111 trillion. That's about 95% of the entire world's GDP. Second, we have corporate debt. This is money that businesses borrow to expand, invest, or simply stay afloat. Companies issue bonds, take out loans, and rack up obligations. Corporate debt makes up a massive chunk of that $324 trillion figure. Third, there's household debt. Mortgages, credit cards, student loans, car payments, all the money that individuals owe. While it's smaller compared to government and corporate debt, it still adds up to tens of trillions globally. Now here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. The world's total debt is roughly 240 to 300% of global GDP. Think about that for a second. The entire world owes 2 to 3 times more than it produces in a year. It's like making $50,000 a year but owing $150,000. For an individual, that would be considered a financial disaster. But for the world? This is just business as usual. So how did we get here? The answer is surprisingly simple. Debt has been growing faster than the economy for decades. Every time there's a crisis, governments and central banks respond by printing money, lowering interest rates, and encouraging more borrowing. The 2008 financial crisis, the COVID pandemic, every major economic shock leads to the same solution: more debt. After 2008, central banks around the world slashed interest rates to near zero. The idea was to stimulate the economy by making it cheap to borrow money. And it worked, sort of. Economies recovered, but debt exploded. Governments borrowed to bail out banks. Companies borrowed to buy back their own stock. People borrowed to buy homes they couldn't afford. The cycle continued. Then came COVID in 2020. Governments worldwide unleashed unprecedented spending to keep their economies alive. Stimulus checks, business loans, unemployment benefits. It was necessary, but it came at a cost. Global debt surged by trillions in just 2 years. We're still paying for it today. But here's the kicker. Not all debt is created equal. Some countries are drowning while others are managing just fine. Let's break down who owes what. The United States leads the pack with over $38 trillion in government debt alone. That's more than the entire GDP of China and Japan combined. Every year, the US spends hundreds of billions just on interest payments. In fact, net interest payments have nearly tripled in the past 5 years. That money doesn't go to schools, roads, or healthcare. It goes straight to bondholders. China comes in second with $18.7 trillion in government debt. Together, the US and China account for more than half of the world's public debt. Think about that. 2 countries hold 51.8% of global government debt. That concentration of debt is incredibly dangerous. Japan is another major player. Their debt to GDP ratio is over 250%, one of the highest in the world. Yet somehow Japan keeps functioning. How? Low interest rates, and the fact that most of their debt is owned domestically, not by foreign countries. But it's not just the big players who are in trouble. Developing nations are facing a full-blown debt crisis. According to recent data, 61 developing countries now spend 10% or more of their government revenues just on interest payments. Not paying down the debt, just the interest. Even more shocking, 3.4 billion people live in countries that spend more on debt interest than they do on healthcare or education. Let that sink in. Billions of people live in nations that prioritize paying foreign creditors over the health and education of their own citizens. Countries like Sri Lanka, Lebanon, and Zambia have already defaulted on their debt in recent years. They simply couldn't pay anymore. And more countries are teetering on the edge. Argentina, Pakistan, Egypt, the list goes on. When these countries default, the consequences are devastating. Hyperinflation, currency collapse, social unrest. It's an economic death spiral. Now you might be thinking, okay, this sounds bad, but what does this actually mean for me? Why should I care about some abstract number like $324 trillion? Here's why. Debt has consequences, real consequences that affect your everyday life. First, high debt leads to higher taxes. Governments need to pay back what they owe, and that money comes from taxpayers. As debt grows, so does the tax burden. Or governments cut spending on essential services. Either way, regular people suffer. Second, high debt limits economic growth. When governments and businesses are drowning in debt, they can't invest in the future. No new infrastructure, no innovation, no job creation. The economy stagnates. Third, high debt makes the financial system fragile. When everyone owes everyone else massive amounts of money, one default can trigger a domino effect. Remember 2008? That's what happens when the debt house of cards collapses. Banks fail, businesses shut down, people lose their jobs and homes. Fourth, debt creates inflation. When governments can't afford to pay their debt, they print more money. More money chasing the same amount of goods means prices go up. Your salary stays the same, but everything costs more. That's inflation, and it's a hidden tax on your purchasing power. And finally, debt leads to currency crises. When a country's debt becomes unsustainable, investors lose confidence. They dump that country's currency, and its value plummets. Suddenly, imports become unaffordable. Everything from food to fuel skyrockets in price. It's happening in countries around the world right now. So what's the solution? Can we ever escape this debt trap? The honest answer is, it's complicated. There are a few options, but none of them are painless. Option 1, economic growth. If the economy grows faster than the debt becomes more manageable. It's like getting a big raise at work. Your debt stays the same, but you have more income to pay it off. The problem? Most developed countries are experiencing slow growth. It's hard to outgrow your debt when your economy is barely expanding. Option 2, austerity. Governments cut spending drastically to reduce their debt. Greece tried this after their debt crisis. It led to massive unemployment, poverty, and social unrest. Austerity works in theory, but it's politically toxic. No politician wants to be the one who cuts pensions and healthcare. Option 3, inflation. Governments let inflation run hot, which erodes the real value of debt. If you owe $1,000 today, but inflation is 10% per year, that debt is worth less and less over time. The problem? Inflation hurts ordinary people the most. Wages rarely keep up with rising prices. Option 4, default. Just don't pay. Walk away from the debt. This is the nuclear option. It destroys a country's credit rating, locks them out of international markets, and causes economic chaos. But sometimes it's the only option left. Option 5, debt restructuring. Negotiate with creditors to reduce the amount owed or extend the payment timeline. This happens more often than you'd think. It's basically a controlled default. Creditors get some of their money back, and the country gets breathing room. The reality is, most countries will use a combination of these strategies. A little growth here, a little inflation there, maybe some restructuring when things get really bad. But the fundamental problem remains: we live in a world addicted to debt, and like any addiction, breaking free is incredibly difficult. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The global debt crisis won't be solved anytime soon. In fact, it's likely to get worse before it gets better. Interest rates are higher than they've been in years, which means servicing debt is more expensive. Geopolitical tensions are rising, which increases uncertainty and risk. And climate change is forcing governments to spend trillions on adaptation and mitigation. All of this adds up to one conclusion: more debt is coming. The question isn't whether global debt will continue to grow, it's how long the system can sustain it before something breaks. So what can you do? As an individual, you can't control global debt levels, but you can control your own financial situation. Avoid unnecessary debt, build an emergency fund, invest in assets that hold value during inflation, like real estate or commodities, diversify your income streams, and most importantly, Stay informed. The world's $324 trillion debt is the biggest financial story of our time. It affects everything from the price of groceries to the stability of governments, and yet most people have no idea it even exists. But now you do, and knowledge is power. The more you understand how the financial system works, the better prepared you'll be for whatever comes next. Because one thing is certain, the debt crisis is far from over. In fact, it's just getting started.